It is another Fight Island card, and I'm really looking forward to this one because we have a lot of fights that are probably going to fly under the radar, including this contest at 155 pounds. We have Jessin Ayari making their return. Mr. Abacus representing Germany, taking on the Italian Stallion, Luigi Vendramini. Matt, what can I say here? I mean, for Luigi Vendramini, stepped in on short notice in the place of Bilal Muhammad. And I say short notice. It was really short notice. Up a weight class, taking on one of your favorite fighters, Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. And really gave a pretty good account of himself. Now, I know if you just look at the fact that, yeah, he got knocked out against Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos, you might think, oh, this guy's trash. He's no good. He's a young guy. The record was padded. Maybe it was. But overall, wasn't that bad. I mean, striking wasn't up to snuff, but it's hard to look good in terms of striking against Capoeira. But the spot where Luigi Vendramini shone was the fact that he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and some of the things that he was able to do when he was pressuring, trying to implement his wrestling, and the fact that he was able to scramble like a spider monkey to the back of Elizeu and stick in a pretty tight, it was a bit of a neck crank, then it was a rear naked. Zaleski get out of it. The other thing that happened at the start of that fight, if you go back and watch, Zaleski had a Peruvian necktie, and it was in tight. It's a submission that you don't often see in MMA. Vendramini able to get out of that one. He's training at a Factory X for this fight. Now, I know if you watch before the fight against Zaleski, he was with Team Alpha Male. He's made the move over with Mark Montoya. So, I mean, think of the people that he has in his corner. You're talking the Alexander Hernandez's, the Yusuf Salal's, and Brandon Royval, who we saw this past week. Lyman Good's another one, too. So overall, Luigi Vendramini, you know the jiu-jitsu is good. The striking's probably going to improve. I mean, this is a guy that made his debut about 2 years ago, so he's 22 at the time. You can only go up from there, and I think when you already have that base of jiu-jitsu, the sky's the limit for a younger guy like this. So you take your lumps, your first fight there. He's been off for quite some time, bit of a knee injury, and as you can see, that fight at 70 his last time out, moving down to 55 and taking on Jessin Ayari. And this is a fighter that you might recognize. I mean, came into the UFC, had a big win in his debut over Jim Wallhead, and then after that, he took on Darren Till. Now, Darren Till weighed 176 pounds in that fight, beat him handily. So Ayari comes back out, moves down to 55, his first fight at lightweight against Stevie Ray. And Matt, I'm going to let you take over because that fight wasn't entirely close. Jessin Ayari won the fight, and I mean close because Stevie Ray should have won the fight.
So remember when Dominic Reyes beat John Jones? But it just so happened that the three judges thought that John Jones beat Dominic Reyes there on that night. That fight was kind of similar because I thought at the end of that fight, Jessin Ayari not only beat Stevie Ray, he probably 30-27'd him, and then the judges' scorecard.
So I'm going to have a look at the score. So again, Jessin Ayari won that fight, lost that fight, should have won it. If you go over to MMA decisions, you had one total voter going 29-28 Ray. You had 7 voters going 29-28 Ayari, and 4 scored at 30-27 Ayari. And if you go back and watch that fight, Stevie Ray was working. He was kind of pushing the pace on Ayari. He was throwing a lot of nice kicks, but every time Ayari found success, he was rushing in. He'd throw a nice combination 1-2, a little bit of whip on the end of his strikes, and he looked really good. It's just, apparently in the mind of the judges, that didn't translate to points.
That fight, it really felt like Jessin Ayari was able to use his movement, and the fact that he wasn't always moving forward, every time they would get into some sort of an exchange, Ayari would land the heavier shots on Stevie Ray, but it was just the fact that Stevie Ray seemed like he was walking forward the majority of the fight. Maybe that could have swayed the judges, but when you actually watch who won the overall, Ayari won, and I didn't think it was very close. I thought his striking looked really good in that fight, and it kind of evolved in that fight too. He took kind of the Henry Cejudo in the Sergio Pettis fight kind of stretch where it's like, oh, he used to fight like this, now he fights like this. He's got this open stance and kind of that more karate-esque style. And I thought it worked really well for him. Now, of course, he didn't get the result that I'm sure he was hoping for, but if we see that level of striking continue to improve, not saying he's going to be the next Henry Cejudo by any means, but if he can get kind of that karate-esque style with the footwork, I think this could be a nightmare for Vendramini to try to get him down to the ground, because if you are that really versatile guy who can land a couple shots, then move on the outside, just kind of probe with your jab and whatnot, it's going to be really hard to get taken down by a guy who's not a high-level wrestler. Now, with Vendramini, if it does go to the ground, he can finish it with submissions a lot better than most high-level wrestlers can. But it's just the fact that I don't know if his wrestling is good enough to get the fight to where his strength really lies. So I think Ayari might be able to run away with this one.
And with Jessin Ayari, I mean, a background, a little bit of sambo, a little bit of kickboxing. Matt all of a sudden comparing Jessin Ayari 1 and 2 in the UFC to Henry Cejudo. Who knows what could happen? But overall, pretty well rounded there. He will switch his stances quite a bit. You'd think he'd throw a nice low kick, and I remember watching that Stevie Ray fight where they talked about his low kick. He throws it at very low percentages. It's not something that we see all that much, and that's one of those things that it seems like every fight out, somebody will mention, oh boy, the low kick. Hey, that's pretty cool. But I mean, in terms of this fight, BJJ brown belt for Ayari, like I said, black belt for Vendramini, training with one of the better gyms that you could be at this point. In terms of the odds, they have shifted. Ayari -115, Vendramini -110. Vendramini open a -175 favorite. Ayari open the +135 underdog. If you look over on Tapology at a 636 votes, 71% going with Vendramini, 47% saying he's going to win by knockout, 40% saying he can win by decision. I think that's a little odd, Matt, and this is one of the more pick'em type of fights. It's actually on the card that it's pretty well tough to call because Ayari's been out since, and I insert the clip here, if you're coming to Moncton, UFC Moncton, the first UFC card we ever covered as Fight Night Picks, that was Jessin Ayari's last time out. For Luigi Vendramini, it was the same month 2 years ago, the last time we saw him. So it's really tough to tell how they progressed. Both guys have actually had separate knee injuries, so that's pretty interesting. So it's tough to tell exactly what you're going to get. With Jessin Ayari, like you said, nice combinations, nice pop on his shots. It's not like it's translated to big knockout wins or anything, but he was on quite a win streak, 6-fight win streak coming into the UFC. Then he beat Wallhead. So, I mean, you know, the sky was the limit. And for Vendramini, he was 8-0, but the competition wasn't really the best. He was, however, finishing the majority of them quite quickly. I like Luigi Vendramini here. I like, you know, he was a decent favorite. That line shifted quite a bit on Ayari. I wouldn't be surprised in the least if Ayari's able to win on points because he is definitely going to be the bigger fighter in there. But I do like the upside for Luigi Vendramini. And I think if he can close the distance, really wear on Ayari, he should be able to force a takedown and get a submission here.
I mean, this really will come down. It's going to be a story of two different fights. Either Vendramini gets the fight to the ground and does win by submission, or Ayari is able to kind of work on the outside, point his way to a decision. I think the decision for Ayari is the more likely of the outcomes, but like Craig said, I can kind of see it going either way.
Matt, you beat me last weekend. You've got Jessin Ayari here. I'm going with the Brazilian Italian Stallion, Luigi Vendramini. Really looking forward to this card. We've got a great main event. We're going to take an extended look at it. Bantamweight title hopes on the line. Holm taking on Irena Aldana. So you're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. And as we always say, let's get into it.